This real estate bubble won't pop. Hello, friends. Welcome to Surviving Tomorrow, a podcast, newsletter, and publication about navigating life in an age of democratic destruction, ecological collapse, and economic irrelevance. Now available for free on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and YouTube. If you'd like to win a book and $100 in free cryptocurrency, any currency of your choice, head over to jaredabrock.substack.com now. I'm your host, Jared A. Brock, and today we're going to be discussing why the average house will cost $10 million within 50 years. But first, an update. I have a son. His name is Concord Thoreau Brock. Concord means peace, and Thoreau means strength. Concord is our favorite revolutionary town in America, home to the Alcotts of Little Women fame, Ralph Waldo Emerson, the Hawthornes, and Henry David Thoreau, the father of environmentalism and the philosopher whose pacifist writings inspired Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. My dear wife Michelle was in labor for a brutal 38 hours, 11 of which were spent in a pub. It is a long and extremely British story, let me tell you. She saw 28 medical personnel over 5 wards and 3 shift changes, and I recorded over 460 plus second contractions. In the end, we had one 8.0 pound baby boy, the first male of 11 grandbabies born in our family, and the first boy born in our church in 12 years. We are now accepting offers for a pre-arranged marriage. I'm feeling extremely grateful for this gorgeous little gift and absolutely astounded by the physical strength and spiritual fortitude of Michelle to endure the whole glorious ordeal. But I am greatly troubled about the world Concord will grow up in. If we keep on our insane global trajectory, he will have to compete with robots for work. He will have to navigate the totalitarian social credit systems and surveillance panopticoins that will rule our world. He'll face resource shortages, extreme weather events, species collapse, and massive societal strains caused by millions of climate change refugees. He'll witness the complete privatization of public services in the hands of the corporatocracy and the cessation of the charade of democracy as the world descends into overt corporate oligarchy. Of course, his daddy and many others are doing their best to fight against all of these corruptions and injustices, but there simply aren't enough leaders who understand the challenges that predator elites pose to human life and widespread flourishing. In that sense, having a child amidst this corrupt corporatocracy is part of our act of resistance. It's our declaration of hope against chance. One of Concord's biggest challenges will be affordable housing. House prices are currently at an all-time high, but we are not in a real estate bubble. We are in the middle of a pricing paradigm shift. The old paradigm, the one that you're probably familiar with, and the one that still deludes billions, is that a house's price is the maximum amount that an area's average local buyer can afford to mortgage over 25 to 40 years. But because wages have flatlined and purchasing parity is the same as 1978, the only rational explanation for this current price explosion is a giant debt bubble, right? Wrong. The new paradigm is this. A house's value is now the maximum amount of annual rental income that can be extracted from it by a global investor multiplied by maximal institutional leverage. This is the biggest paradigm shift in the history of human shelter, and it's the reason why the vast majority will never own a home in the future. Because our family homes are just future hedge fund investments. In 50 years, the average house will cost $10 million. Most people think that's impossible, but I'll show you the exact math on how it's going to play out. Sure, there might be more real estate crashes, but they'll just be bigger versions of 2008, buying opportunities for the hyper elites. Even with temporary price drops, expect overall prices to continue hard up and to the right for 9 major reasons. Number 1, population is growing. Our global family currently contains almost 8 billion people, headed to 10.5 billion within 50 years. That's a 33% increase in the number of people who need to be housed. While this doesn't mean house prices will automatically increase by 33%, population growth does create more demand, which will certainly increase prices significantly. Number 2, people are moving to cities. The overall population will, quote-unquote, only rise by 33%, but look at the stats on where everyone is moving. Cities. 4 billion people currently live in urban areas, but that number is set to jump to 7 billion within 30 years and will hit 8 billion within 50. So essentially, housing demand where people want to live will double. What will the average house price cost when twice as many people are bidding on it? That remains to be seen. Number 3, more people are living alone. My grandmother was raised in a farmhouse with a mom, a dad, and half a dozen siblings. My father-in-law was one of 9 children. Today, both of those homes probably contain less than 4 people. In major urban centers like New York, it's less than 2.4 people per unit and falling quickly. As more people live alone, we'll need far more housing units. When there's more demand without adequate supply, prices increased. Number 4, multiple home ownership. Looking at you, small-time landlords and non-resident Airbnb hosts. More than 23 million American landlords own more than one home. That might not seem like a lot, but what it actually means is that 115 million Americans don't get to own a home because a wealth extractor owns 2. As one of my readers, Valerie Cattell, wrote, Airbnb-type models altered the market irreversibly by proving on a large scale that short-term rentals are more lucrative than stable long-term residents. And this is going to have a huge impact on the price of homes in the future. Number 5, housing construction isn't keeping up. Not even close. The U.S. housing supply has been underbuilt for over a decade, and we're currently building just 6 houses for every 10 new houses. Now add to that fact, number 6, building costs are soaring amidst material shortages. Lumber, paint, concrete, glass, labor, land, all rising faster than average wages. We live on a finite planet. Whether we like it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not, we live with limited resources, and those resources are becoming more expensive to extract. Accordingly, constructing new homes will continue to cost more and more and more. Number 7, real inflation is soaring. It's almost certainly over 10% this year, no matter what the feds lie to us and say that it is. And real estate always tracks with inflation. These days, in fact, shelter prices are far outpacing inflation. In Canada, real estate prices are up 40% since last year. Asset inflation in America is up over 30% this year across the stock market and real estate market. Even without any of the other price factors on this list, if rampant real estate inflation averages, say, 7.5% for the next 50 years, inflation alone will send the average house price over $10 million. Number 8, the monopolists are here. When you allow speculation and investment in residential real estate, you end up where every other capitalist sector ends up, with a handful of monopolists owning all the assets in the industry. If you study history, you see this happen with steel under Carnegie, railroads under Vanderbilt, oil under Rockefeller, banking under JP Morgan, online retail under Jeff Bezos, luxury goods under Bernard Arnault, web search under Google and YouTube's Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and so on. The reality is simple, my friends. Monopolists will not stop until they are stopped. Obviously, up until this point in history, real estate has been a far harder market to corner because of the high upfront investment costs, but that's all about to change. Because of number 9, outrageous leverage. As one of my readers, Throop Vaughn, put, a privileged class of investors are allowed to utilize the Fed and private banking system to print nearly infinite quantities of money via leverage and use that money to outbid first-time homebuyers who had to work for years to earn that money. This is where things get truly ugly. Once monopolies form, they utilize the power of financialization to drop an economic atomic bomb on their competition. Let's say a condo is for sale right now. A first-time buyer like yourself or maybe your kids can afford, say, $1,200 per month. So they're able to bid up to $250,000 towards a mortgage. But a landlord can squeeze, say, $1,300 a month in rent from a long-term tenant. If the landlord is expecting half the revenue to go to costs and they want a 2.5% return on investment plus appreciation, they're willing to pay up to, say, $300,000. But a non-resident Airbnb host can fetch $2,500 per month in nightly rent, double the long-term landlord, so they're willing to pay up to $600,000. But even they will get outbid eventually. A predacious hedge fund, like all monopolies, will shave their profit margins to near nil to destroy their competition. In fact, Amazon's profit margins were negative for 7 years while they killed off their competition. So the hedge fund is willing to pay up to $1.2 million to turn your house into a vacation property, nearly 5 times what the average person can afford. But here's the really insidious move. The monopoly will partner with banks that, thanks to corporate-controlled government that constantly prints ultra-cheap money and lets them create credit out of thin air, allows them to leverage their position to an absurd degree. The monopoly won't be paying $1.2 million for that house. They'll be betting less than $60,000 with 20x leverage and a 20x return on investment. By comparison, prior to the 2008 crash, Lehman Brothers was leveraged by a whopping 31x. A financialized hedge fund or bank will be willing to pay many more multiples than you can ever possibly hope to afford. And it still gets worse. Just like the banks spinning off millions of mortgages as CDOs during the 2008 subprime debt crisis, the new real estate monopolists will take thousands of their underperforming vacation units, bundle them into shiny-looking investment packages, and get their brokers to sell them to the derivatives markets for even more leverage. Before we know it, house prices will soar to astronomical heights. An unbelievable amount of institutions are currently getting in on the landlording con. Banks are all announcing targets: 50,000 houses by the end of next year, 100,000 houses by the end of 2024. In the corporate captured UK, even clothing department stores like John Lewis have announced their intention to acquire 10,000 residential rentals. In the same way that our grandparents wouldn't have believed where real estate prices are today, most people today simply cannot fathom how expensive shelter is going to get in the years ahead. American median house prices have 12x'd in the past 50 years, and if that trend just continues with no other factors, houses in 50 years will average at least $3.7 million. But with these 9 radical new factors at play, especially the abhorrent financialization of a human necessity, we will see exponential house price increases unparalleled in human history. Average house prices could easily rise to $3.7 million, certainly likely to go to $5 million, and perhaps even $10 million per house, as every desirable location is turned into a vacation property to profit massive monopolies. It's already happening in major cities like London and Paris, and the financialization curse is spreading globally. I know what you're thinking. Well, that's cool if house prices rise. I already own a house, so I'll just hold on to it for a few decades and retire with $10 million. But you're forgetting about land tax. Land tax is currently 1% to 2% per year and rising. Where are you going to come up with an extra $100,000 to $200,000 per year in after-tax income to pay for it, especially when your pay is guaranteed not to keep up and a robot will replace half of all jobs within half a century? The answer is, you won't. The only people who will be able to afford it are likely highly leveraged institutional investors extracting top tourist dollar, likely with a corporate land tax rebate like the crooked landlords already enjoy in the UK. Everyone else, the real societal contributors, you, all the working people you know, will likely live in highly undesirable tenements. The new economic paradigm is designed to make you a renter. If we keep on our current course, 99% of the global population will be housing insecure within a generation. According to the elitist World Economic Forum, we'll all own nothing and supposedly be happier, but I don't believe them for a second. I don't want to live in a world where people are forced to be homeless because they can't afford to live in a society that's economically engineered to impoverish them. In a civil society, human necessities like shelter wouldn't be commodified. The solution is simple. We need to make it illegal to turn a passive profit off basic human necessities like shelter. There, I said it. We need to ban for-profit residential real estate investment. Commercial real estate is a topic of conversation for another day, but it is a big part of the reason why bookshops and cinemas are closing and why restaurants are getting more expensive, because we have to support those hungry landlords. And of course, not-for-profits like Indwell are great. After all, even in a society with full unemployment, with full employment at living wages, which isn't going to happen, and even in a society with sustainable universal basic income, which isn't going to happen, the bottom 10% will likely never own their own home for a myriad of reasons, whether it be mental health, physical impairments, or just chronic rootlessness or restlessness. But for-profit residential real estate investment, it has to be made illegal. Illegal to be a for-profit landlord. Illegal to have an Airbnb as a non-owner occupied house, illegal for hedge funds to buy up neighborhoods, illegal to financialize houses as tradable bulk commodities. While it's tempting to give little landlords a pass, even they must be eliminated because financialized investors have an advantage over families, and the latter should always be prioritized in a civil society. The working class can no longer afford to support the non-contributing hyper-extractive landlording and banking classes. But don't expect such bans to stick, of course. Hedge funds and Airbnb will continue to sue cities, states, and nations while lobby bribing and selecting puppet politicians to do their corporate will in Congress. There's only one thing we can realistically do. We need to make residential real estate investment wildly unprofitable. There are many ways we can do this. We can charge an eye-watering premium on second home purchases. Start at 250% and keep raising it until investors give up and invest in anything except for residential real estate. Why should anyone be allowed to own a second house until everyone has the opportunity to buy their first? Why should a fund be able to passively extract wealth from active societal contributors? We could issue outrageously priced landlord licenses and zoning permits for those who are hell-bent on running a commercial business in a residential neighborhood. We could drastically increase tenant rights, safety standards, maintenance standards, and cleanliness standards so landlords have to continually invest more than they extract. We could zone all residential neighborhoods as owner-occupied only, so real estate investors would have no choice but to allocate their capital to commercial holiday properties in commercial zones. We could start not-for-profit city, state, and federal banks that loan directly to house buyers without the need for middleman credit printing banks. We could tax passive extraction income at 90+% and use the revenue to build owner-occupied houses. We could encourage young entrepreneurs to start blitz building affordable, eco-friendly, owner-occupied houses by the millions. We need to build 1 billion new houses in the next decade to keep up with global population growth. So we should invest heavily in innovative startups who can help crush the house as investment market. And of course, we need to bring a class action lawsuit against Airbnb in every jurisdiction where they've stolen even a single unit of family housing. We can debate the exact methods by which we eliminate for-profit residential real estate investment, so long as we understand the fundamental need to do so. We need to scrub culture clean of the notion that a house is an investment or a savings account. Houses can't be commodities. They need to be homes. I subscribe to the radical belief that safe, healthy, adequate, and affordable shelter is a universal human right. Yes, a human right. I'm aware that that's not in the Constitution, and this simply proves that America still has room for improvement. The United Nations and every nation need to make affordable home ownership an unconditional universal human right and make investment in residential real estate illegal. If hyper-elites retaining obscene wealth matters more than the majority being able to afford shelter, then frankly, friends, it's time for a revolution. At present, a new hyper-commodification paradigm is emerging that stands in direct opposition to the human right to shelter. Housing as investment is a deeply antisocial belief that needs to be quelled if we are to thrive as a global family. Family homes or hedge fund investments? The paradigm that prevails is ours to decide. I need your help to grow the Surviving Tomorrow community. If you think this episode is important, please email the link to your friends. We are listener supported, so if you'd like to become a patron, please visit jaredbrock.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.